transcript of the interview could be released within 48 hours. Leading off our discussion tonight, our Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell of California. He is a Judiciary Committee member and a House Intelligence Committee member, and he's also a Democratic candidate for president. Also joining us, John Heilman, national affairs analyst for NBC News and MSNBC. He's co-host and executive producer of Showtime's The Circus. And Congressman Swalwell, this interview today with Hope Hicks, what was the committee? Jerry Nadler is saying you got a lot of useful information at the committee. So how much of what the committee wanted to hear did the committee actually get to hear?
Good evening, Lawrence. I was a part of that interview team today, and what we saw principally was just how far the president is willing to go to protect the country from knowing what he did with the Russians, what he did to obstruct the investigation into that, and then just to show us what he's willing to do to obstruct Congress. And then a witness in Ms. Hicks, who I interviewed a year ago, who really hasn't changed. She was, quite forthcoming in some ways. She has a very deep knowledge and a front row seat to what the president and candidate Trump did, but also she knows where the red lines are, and that's where she just stops and refuses to answer. So I think it's important for us to just see where those red lines are for the Trump team, and then to work around them in the subpoenas and document requests we send out. So we're going to get to the truth eventually, whether they want to tell us now or tell us later.
Let's listen to what your colleague Madeline Dean said about it.
I asked her about communications with Russians or Russian officials. She tried to say there were no communications whatsoever. When I asked a little more specifically, she admitted there were probably an email or more. She didn't think they were relevant. And I tried to just impress upon the witness that it wasn't up to her to decide what was relevant, that we were here to get the facts, the truth before the American people. So I had some stonewalling there.
Congressman Swalwell, did she say anything about that part of the questioning about contacts and activities during the campaign? Did she say anything that was different from what she appeared to say in the Mueller report?
Well, I'll characterize it this way. She knew what she was not supposed to say, and that's where the memory would become foggy, or she would just refuse to answer. And she wouldn't really go into the Mueller report, citing that as a time when she was at the White House. And again, what this shows me, Lawrence, is how guilty this gang is. Innocent people don't come in and act this way. Innocent presidents don't tell their aides or former aides to go in and to put up walls around what you can say. Innocent people say, you know what, we didn't do anything wrong. You go there and tell them everything we did, and we're going to be cleared. That's not what we've seen. That's not what we will see. And that's because we don't have an innocent president.
John Heilman, Hope Hicks was sitting there taking advice from a White House lawyer and advice from a Justice Department lawyer. But the decision about whether to answer questions or not was, in fact, completely up to her. And so the case going forward to compel her testimony is against her.
Right. And I think, look, she's trying to walk a line and trying to keep herself from getting into trouble for refusing to testify. And so she's come forward while not saying anything that will get her in trouble with her former boss and with the coterie around him. I think it is, several congressmen today said that this was obstruction of justice in plain sight. I think that's clearly the case. We're witnessing a rolling case of obstruction of justice when it comes to how the Trump administration is dealing with these people. And I do continue to ask the question over and over again, why on earth was it acceptable for Democrats to allow this testimony to take place behind closed doors? Because I think it would have been potentially politically devastating. It's not going to be devastating, have not seen it. It's not going to be devastating just reading it in the transcript. Seeing it on television would have had a different effect. It would have changed, I think, the dynamic in a fundamental way. And I just have to question whether or not Democrats are serious, taking this matter seriously, to have reached this accommodation, because I think in the end she would have testified publicly under the right kind of pressure.
We happen to have a member of the Judiciary Committee right here. Congressman Swalwell, what about that? Why was it agreed to allow her to close the door on this and keep the cameras out?
Yeah, I wish it was in public too, and I'll let the chairman answer that. I think all of these witnesses should have to testify in public, and it may take a little longer to get there because they may not be willing to come in at all, but a court's going to say there's no way around this. I think the public needs to really get read in and see just how lawless of a candidate and a president we have.
Congressman, what is the plan that the Judiciary Committee is working under? And all committees, when they have a plan, whether it's legislative or otherwise, have a schedule of completing work and a purpose to the work. I don't understand what the schedule of the Judiciary Committee is or what the purpose of the Judiciary Committee's inquiries are at this point.
So it's looking at, obviously, Volume 1 of the Mueller report, the Russian connections, and then, of course, the attempts to obstruct by the president. The challenge, Lawrence, is there's the wish list of who is relevant, and then there's the list of people who are actually even willing to engage with you. Hope Hicks kind of goes in a middle area because she was willing to come in but wasn't willing to do it publicly. And then there's a whole list of people who won't even come in at all. And so you don't really get, I would say, a timeline here that matches up with the series of events. You're really getting people coming in based on their willingness and where we are with the courts. Again, that's all the more reason I'm calling for impeachment. I've had enough. This is obstruction of Congress in real time. This is a mass obstruction spree that this president is on, and we can't wait for the courts now. He's risking the republic the way he's acting.
John, that final part of the answer is the part that I understand. The objective, Congressman Swalwell's objective would be impeachment and beginning the impeachment process. The president's objective is very clearly what his objective has been all along, which is delay. He played a game with Mueller's office for a year about will he or won't he testify. He was never going to testify, but he managed to build in a year of delay in playing the game about will he testify. Now the president is having witnesses do exactly the same thing. Right. Play the delay game. This committee is going at most one witness per week on this. And so the legal enforcement, once the witness has denied the committee what the committee wants, the legal enforcement on this is now a bunch of backed up vehicles on a highway to nowhere.
Yes, and to your point, I think your question was the pointed and correct question, which is what is the point? I mean, it is not clear what the point is. Congressman Swalwell now has a point. His point is he thinks we should begin impeachment proceedings. But I don't understand. This is my question about why she was allowed to testify in private. Is Bob Mueller, we're now had a lot of conversation in the last 24 hours about the Mueller situation because the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, Chairman Schiff, has said time is running out. We've had members of those respective important committees say, we got to get him up now. We're going to have to subpoena him. Are they going to let Mueller come up and testify in private? What good would that do? But I assume the answer to that question is no. It would be insane to allow that to happen. But on the basis of this, and on the basis of the mealy-mouthed, contradictory, unclear, obscurantist kind of strategy that the Democratic leadership is pursuing right now, I don't know what the end game is. And that's, of course, it makes sense that the tactics are confusing if you can't clearly say what the end game is. And no one who's in Democratic leadership right now is clearly saying so.
I do want to get to the Deutsche Bank news of the night, but Congressman Swalwell, let me give you one more swing at what John's talking about here and what I've referenced. And everyone who's ever gone to law school or maybe even high school knows the phrase, justice delayed is justice denied. And the president certainly knows that. And so as I look at the possible calendar of the committee's work, and having worked in a Senate committee, I have a rough feel for this, not exactly in an impeachment mode, but you are very unlikely to get all of your subpoenas enforced this year at the pace that this is going, if they're going to be enforced. And then you're going to be moving what would be the impeachment clock, possibly, according to that schedule, not even started until we're in an actual election year, at which time it begins to look a bit absurdist in terms of timing going up against an election. That's what is going through, I believe, President Trump's mind, that he's going to be able to back this process up through delay to the point where even someone like you who wants the impeachment process will admit a year from now, in the middle of the summer of an election year, it's too late to start it.
Yeah, I'm going to throw the political calculation out, and if it happens to be in an election year, especially because this president, through his delaying and obstructing and tampering, caused that, well then, sorry, Mr. Trump, that's what you have brought. But I just want to defend that I do think if you're looking at what the strategy is here right now, we have our noses up against the canvas board. We're living in this day to day, and different strokes are being put on the canvas board, from subpoenas to witness requests to court fights to oversight. I think maybe a year from now, when we step back and we see the court fights we've won, the witnesses who have come in, that you will see a picture of holding this president accountable. So I don't want to, throw out, the strategy, right now. I think it's frustrating right now because he is so lawless and he challenges us. But we have to make sure we uphold a rule of law with a lawless ruler, and sometimes it doesn't move as fast as any of us want.
John Heilman, the Deutsche Bank report tonight in the New York Times, the FBI is investigating Donald Trump's favorite and at this point only bank. And Donald Trump, it's because of reports that Donald Trump's transactions and Jared Kushner's transactions were flagged by auditors within the bank whose job it was to flag possible suspicious transactions.
And then nothing was done about it because apparently something that anybody who's followed the career of Donald Trump and his entanglement with this particular bank, then corrupt leadership in the bank apparently quashed those movements, the examinations that should have taken place. And I think, the question has always been, why is it that when no one else was willing to give Donald Trump money, why was Deutsche Bank willing to give him money? And what are the implications of that in terms of international potential money laundering cases and connections to foreign powers and so on? But it's obvious, the more reporting we see on this, the more it's obvious that people's suspicions about Deutsche Bank and that there is something wrong here, not just in terms of these specific transactions, but in terms of the history of the relationship between the Trump family and this bank, that there's a rat here that is starting to smell pretty bad, and it's going to start to smell worse and worse the more we sniff it.
Congressman Swalwell, who's going to get there first? Because we just outlined your Intelligence Committee is looking at the Deutsche Bank. The Judiciary Committee has an interest in Deutsche Bank. Now we know the FBI is investigating Deutsche Bank.
Yeah, we believe that the House Intelligence Committee is probably one of the first sets of eyes that's looking at the president's financial dealings with Russia. That looks like that was a red line for the Mueller team, and so that's the leadership of Chairman Schiff.
Can I just pause you on that? When you say a red line for the Mueller team, are you saying it's a line they didn't cross and therefore they left it for you?
I've read the Mueller report. I did not see any investigation into the president's finances with Russia. So we have a responsibility to look at that, yes. Second, I would say that if Jared Kushner was doing business while he was working at the White House with the Russians, he should be thrown out of the White House. And third, I do not trust this Attorney General to be anywhere near an investigation into the president's family doing business with the Russians. If that proves to be the case, we will need another special counsel. There's no way that we could trust the objectivity of this Attorney General to investigate the president if business transactions are ongoing right now with the Russians.
John Heilman, New York Times breaks a story. The FBI, working beneath Attorney General William Barr in the organizational chart of the Justice Department, is investigating the president's bank, possibly involving transactions of the president. Congressman Swalwell's point, can Attorney General William Barr be the real supervisor of that investigation?
It depends. There's nothing that he's done that makes him seem reliable on this matter. And anyone who is skeptical or cynical about if he becomes activist on this, it's right to be, as skeptical as you could possibly be. In a normal world, the Attorney General would say the FBI, of course, can do this. And I think it's clear that some parts of the FBI are still operating as if it's a normal world. They are pursuing this investigation as if the Attorney General will allow them to do what they're going to do. But do I think that that is a reasonable assumption on their part? I do not. And I think that that Congressman Swalwell and others in oversight need to keep a very, very close eye on this thing to make sure that the integrity of the investigation is maintained.
Congressman Eric Swalwell, thank you very much for joining us tonight and helping us work through our confusion about where we are in this process and where we're going. Really appreciate you joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks.
And John Heilman's going to stay with us.